ugliness and my laziness. First things first, you're going to need regular paper actually you need graph paper. You could do it all on graph paper if you wanted. If you do not have graph paper, come see me. You will need at least one piece of graph paper. When you're in the closet, we're going to have to get out more graph paper.
Wow.
What? Write me about it.
I'm not recording or anything. Jordan, do you need graph paper?
No.
Okay. I do.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. So you need graph paper, and you could write your work on a separate sheet of paper. I don't care if you write it on the graph paper. Yes, you must show work. Now let's look at our packet and see which ones require work and why. So, where is my packet? It starts off on number 1. It says complete a table of values and a graph. So do you have to have a graph on number 1? Yeah, it says so in the directions. Complete a table of value and a graph. Okay, I'm going to be lazy and put all of my work on the graph paper. So number 1, I'm supposed to complete a table of values for y equals x squared. So I'm going to make me a table of values. And I get to decide. So what sort of range should I use? Should I plug in 100 points? So from negative 100 to positive 100, what sort of range should I use?
10.
10 to 10, so we have 20 points. That's a lot of points. Are we that excited today and that motivated?
What about 5? No, 1. 3.
I'm going to do negative 3 to 3. If you want to go above and beyond and do negative 4 to 4, negative 5 to 5, you sure can. At minimum, you need to do negative 3 to 3. Okay, so again, I'm not doing this for you, so I'm going to fill in a little bit of this table, but should you fill in the rest? Of course. What is 0 squared?
0, 1.
Whoa.
0.
What is 1 squared?
2.
Okay, what is negative 1 squared? What is negative 1 times negative 1? Positive 1. Okay, obviously you need to fill in the other values. But if you read through the problem, it says complete a table of values, we're almost done, and a graph. So we need to make a graph. And I know I had 0, 0, so that's 1 point. 1, 1 was one of my other points. Negative 1, 1 was my third point. I have given you those 3 points. Surely you're going to put more than just that. You're going to figure out 2, whatever. There is a pattern. And if you don't figure out the pattern, you're going to plot the other points. Okay. So then, here comes the fun part of connecting the dots. We're not talking about a linear function anymore. So when you connect the dots, we actually are going to want more of a U. And I swear it'll look prettier once you add more points. And it keeps going, so you'll put arrows. But again, when you come up and show me your graph, you should have more than just the 3 points I put on my graph. Okay, this graph has a name. It's called a parabola. You need to make sure it looks more like a U and less like a V. I know we're in the habit, especially since we've been doing linear functions for forever, of making straight lines and connecting the dots like this. But these are two different graphs. That comes from a different function. If you're doing y equals x squared, it needs to look like a u. It's called a parabola. So make sure yes for this, no for that. Okay, so if I would stop rambling on, you and your group could finish number 1. That seems easy peasy. So let's move on to number 2. It says, using a graphing calculator, graph each function. State which graph is the steepest. What does the word steepest mean? Well, that's a good question. I don't know. That's up for you and your group to decide. But since you're using a graphing calculator, how am I going to know that Maddie and her group actually tried this problem if she's using her calculator? So she can either draw a quick sketch of the graphs, or if she doesn't really want to draw any more graphs other than what's required of her, she can explain her answer choice. Her. Explain your. My group chose C because bleh. Now, if you look at 3, again, it says we're graphing with a calculator. We pick which one's the steepest. 4 is really on you because it says first to decide on your own, then check with a calculator. 5, 6, 7, they all say calculator, calculator, calculator. Well, not 7, 5 and 6. So 2 through 6 are all, let's use the graphing calculator. And that's something we haven't really spent a lot of time on. And I only have 4 graphing calculators. A long, long, long time ago, we talked about an app that you could use for graphing. Does anyone remember the name of that app? Desmos. So if you wanted to use your phone and use your Desmos app, that's a great idea. That's a great idea for today. However, someone said last period, but this Desmos is so much easier than graphing calculator. That is correct, but Desmos is not allowed on standardized tests. Learning how to graph with a graphing calculator, that's something you can use on a standardized test. Those yellow calculators are allowed on the ACT, any standardized test you imagine. Now, there are some that aren't allowed, which we could get into another day. For instance, I have one that's not allowed. Now, why do I have it? Because it does what Desmos does. It graphs in color. We all like things in color. It's easier to spot the difference. The calculator you have in your hands that's yellow, it's going to do every single graph as a black line. So it gets really confusing when they start laying on top of each other. Okay, I'm going to steal your groups. If you want to write down these directions, you can. Surely someone in your group will figure it out. How do you graph on a graphing calculator? What button do you press? Do you know?
Graph.
Is this one says y equals?
You press y equals. So the first thing we do is we press y equals. Then we type in whatever it is we're wanting to graph. I got to clear stuff out. If people have already been typing in it, you might want to clear it out. They're messing with your calculator. Okay, so I went to y equals, and I want to type, let's say, x squared. The button for x says x, t, theta, and n. There's a button for x, and if we're looking at our calculator, it's right here. It says x, t, theta, and n. It's like a variables button. You press it, and now you have an x. Does everyone see where the x button is? It has an x, a t, a theta, and n. Now, if I'm wanting, so that was step 1, that was step 2. Now, if I'm wanting to press x squared, I can press the squared button. There is a button to square things on my calculator. X squared, done. Or, if I want to be fancy, because I realize eventually I could graph x to the third, x to the fourth, etc., I could press the caret symbol, it looks like an up arrow, and press x up arrow 2, or x up arrow 3, x up arrow whatever variable you're needing. Okay, so the 3 who are holding a calculator, do you have the y1 equals x squared? Okay. Then you press the word graph. Now my graph, and I bet your graph on your screen, is set to a normal negative 10 to 10, meaning it goes at negative 10 on the y up to positive 10, negative 10 on the x up to positive 10. If we want to zoom in or anything, that's kind of obvious. You press the zoom button. Now, do we need to do that right now? Not necessarily. It looks pretty easy to read where it is. Just thought you should know. Now, there's potential that eventually you might graph something that has like an intercept at negative 12. Well, our graph only goes to negative 10, so then we would want to zoom out. But normally, negative 10 to 10 is good enough for us. Okay. Well, if we're looking at 2a, apparently we're supposed to be fancy. Not only are we supposed to graph y equals x squared, we're also supposed to graph 2x squared, 3x squared, 4x squared. Guess what? We can do it all at the same time. If you go back to that y equals, you can type in more than just one thing for it to graph. You can tell it to graph 5x squared if you wanted. And it will graph both lines or as many lines as you want. It will graph as many lines as you want on that one coordinate plane. However, now we've got to be paying attention because we've got to remember the outside one's x squared, the inside one's 5x squared. And if we type in a third and a fourth and a fifth, you can see where this will get confusing because they're all in black. That's why some people would prefer to use Desmos or to use like my fancy calculators because each line would be a different color.
Cool.
Okay, are there any questions about how to graph with a graphing calculator? There's one thing I have forgotten to tell you. I forgot to the last period too. So let's say Maggie wants to graph 1/2 x squared. There's not a fraction button on our calculator. We're genuinely going to put in parentheses 1 divided by 2, close parentheses. So parenthesis 1 divided by 2, close parentheses, x squared. She's genuinely going to put the fraction in parentheses. And that is how you graph fraction ones. Okay, I'm sure you will run into a question on graphing as you go, but as I said, today is taking all I got to get from the stool to the chair. So,